And the kind of final section that we have is on averages, everyone's favourite topic. Again, I've been asked in every single interview. You'd think that people get bored. But when you look at statistics and data, there's normally a whole distribution. It just shows what the data looks like. So for example, this is 300 men and the heights of those men. So you have some that are fairly short, you have some that are fairly tall, and then most of them in the middle. There's a nice symmetrical distribution there. So you know that you kind of will have the main proportion of your men that's a similar height. So then you look at what if you have to only give one number to describe the pattern, what number would you, or which average would you go for? There's three common kinds: the mean, the median, and the mode. The mean is the one that everyone thinks average really is, and I did for a fairly long time until everyone started asking me in interviews. So where you just take all the numbers, you add them up, and then you divide by the amount of people that you have. The median is if you line them all up in order, say an order of height, the 300 men, and then you take the middle person out of those. So say if there's 301 men, then you take the 151st person. And that will be your median number, so that will be your median average height. Or you can go for the mode, and that's the kind of the most frequently occurring number. Yeah, again, different averages tell different stories. For things like income and skewed distributions, where you know that there's one side that's bigger than the others. There's a few billionaires, there's quite a few millionaires. Most of us are way low down. But actually, if you calculate the mean, it looks like everyone's earning a lot more than they actually are. The average would be above what half the population are earning. So there, you wouldn't use the mean for income, for example. You'd use the median, where you'd line this all up and you pick the middle person, because that is what you're trying to represent. And then, for example, with the mode, it's probably better to use the mode in things that are not necessarily ordered, or they're uniform, not quantified in one way. Things like people with blonde hair, or your favorite color or fruit, or something like that. Also, where things shouldn't be divided into fractions. For example, the average number of children in a family, you could, what is it now? Is it 2.4 or something is the average number of children in a family? But actually, that's what's this 0.4 of a child? There, you probably go for the mode and go, okay, 2 is the average, and that number is representative of your actual families in Britain. So you need to pick the numbers that actually say what you're trying to, or represent what you're trying to sell. What's the story? And that's what you're going for. Again, if you know what the distribution is, it's always best to provide some extra on the distribution, provide the confidence interval, or provide extra information that would give the reader something to go on apart from the fact this is the middle number. But if your confidence interval is plus or minus 80% out of 100, then actually, your average doesn't say anything. It's all completely spread out. So yeah, bear in mind that the distribution is just as important as the average. This is the income. Depending which average you get a pretty different number. Just choose the right one. And yeah, it's very easy to, especially to make good story, you'd go for the largest one. You'd say, figures obtained from BBC show that some graduates owe more than 60,000 to the student loans company. Yep, but 60,000 there is, the top 3 above 60,000. So that wasn't really an average. I think that's the top of the confidence interval that they've gone for, because that's a big story. Again, you've got to watch out for what you're trying to say. Is the point that the highest thing that could be quite a high number, or are you trying to present the average? In this case, in which case you should go for the middle number as opposed to the one that has the the loudest story going with it.
This is a bit of a challenge for newswriting. We're always looking for the superlative, and that's our job, to find the big thing, and the thing that's the biggest or the most. Yeah. So how do we temper that?
Well, this is what Robert was saying before, that you have to write your story. It has to be an interesting story, otherwise what's the point? But include at some point, you know, that paragraph, whatever, lower down, what the distribution is, for example, where the source comes from. You know, allow people to make their own decision low down if they bother reading the whole story. If they just read the headline, then, you know, that's part of what happens. I don't think you even write your own headlines. I think that's written separately, isn't it? And then you have your article that goes into it. So it's very hard to make that call, but you don't want to mislead people when it's clear that the numbers are not saying what the main title is saying. So add in all the caveats, add in the distribution, or the confidence interval is very wide, or, you know, these sorts of things. So that's the end of my section. I think Richard and I are just going to go and summarize what we've learned. These are some resources that you can access. So Royal Stat Society has a lot of links on it, a lot of statisticians listed that you can actually ask questions, and if you have a question you can go to them and find a statistician. Stats Life the same, and Stats Life actually has all our presentations linked on there that you can see all the slides and everything. Full Fact is a very interesting organisation. I don't know how many people have heard of Full Fact. Basically they're a group of journalists who look at the numbers that, say, politicians use and everyone uses, and then they kind of go and debunk them, or they look into where the sources have come from. It's a very interesting website. It's really worth having a look at. They've done a very good job so far, and they've made quite a few politicians kind of take back what they've said before and correct themselves and change the the information on the handset of what's been recorded in Parliament if the numbers weren't what they were saying they were. Again, stats.org, understandinguncertainty.org, and speakingdatablogspot.co.uk. So there's just a few things to browse through that are very good at explaining the myths. Again, Robert in the morning section put up some more, like listening to More or Less, Tim Harford's show on Radio 4 is excellent, and actually kind of avoids the maths side of things and just looks at the interesting factors. And Tim Harford writes a column in the FT that does a similar thing sometimes, and it's very interesting. Again, the Daniel Kahneman book is very good, the Thinking Fast and Slow, that kind of looks at how people think and the biases that are introduced, and how you write, you know, leading questions can actually affect you a lot more than you think you would. They would, yeah. So I don't know if you want to kind of go through and summarise your section quickly, or...
Yeah, so, yeah, to summarise the main points I was making, those first few initial slides are, there's a lot of merit in trying to put a number into context, so scale it in a way which is meaningful and to which people, including yourselves, including myself, can relate to, is very useful, could make the numbers work for you far better. Data visualization, there's lots of very useful tools out there, but of course there are many common traps that one can fall into, or opportunities perhaps to mislead, which you should nevertheless be, we all need to be aware of when consuming data visualizations. Other things that I touched on, things to do with best practice in reporting percentage changes, absolute and relative risks, and so on. Just all things to be aware of. I thought it was a very interesting point, a very interesting discussion before about the competing tensions and it's sort of quite easy for, say, me to sort of show lots of slides, almost like Mr. T in the World's Craziest Fools or something, and show all these ways that people have slipped up, possibly intentionally misled on occasion. But nevertheless, it's. I imagine I'm not a journalist. There are, of course, tensions of working in that environment, I would have thought, and competing demands, but at least to do so with eyes wide open, I would suggest.
Yeah, and I think my section says the same sort of things. Watch out. Remember that surveys are an estimate on an estimate on an estimate. Watch out for how accurate actually is, who was asked and who commissioned the research in the first place. Are there some sort of vested interests like the wedding insurance company? Correlation does not imply causation. Again, remember this motto, it should be everyone's motto really, because it's very easy to say this must be like this because of that, but actually is it? Do we know? When I was working on waiting times, it was always, you couldn't really, numbers sometimes will go up in winter. And you say, is this to do with winter or is this to do with something else? Is it a seasonal issue? Is there a trend seasonally or is it something else? And where is that line drawn? And again, averages, remember which numbers you're using. Are they presenting what you're trying to say or do they represent something different? Just watch out for your definitions and watch out for context. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Okay. If there's nothing else, you're all done. Thank you very much for attending.